Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of CasonPoint. I am your host, as always, Jason Cason. We have a recap episode where we're going to talk about where sports are at. We have almost every major sport either back in action or with a plan to come back into action. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some hurdles that they have to go through, some things that are happening that weren't really anticipated. And we're going to do that pretty quickly because we have a special section of our episode. We're going to have a special caller. And we're just going to go over my top 10 list of greatest owners / CEOs of sports companies, teams, things of that nature. That will be happening at the end of this episode, so stick around. We will have a special caller, and we will be discussing my top 10 list. See if he agrees, disagrees. I gave up his gender. Bummer. We'll talk with him here a little bit later. He will be our special guest. But first off, I want to dive into a sport that has not yet started, and kind of talk about some things that have been happening since they've started their quote-unquote training camp. So the NBA is supposed to resume here at the end of this month, and they have started their training camps, their warm-ups, whatever you want to call them. Everyone has traveled to Orlando, so all the teams are in Orlando. They're in what's called a quarantine section. They're in a bubble, okay? They're calling it a bubble. This bubble is at basically Walt Disney World Resort. They have multiple facilities, ballrooms, things of that nature. They actually have a ballroom in the hotel that is practice courts. So generally it'd be like a big meeting room where, big companies would rent out that ballroom and things like that. Well, they have placed actual courts in these ballrooms so players can work out, get their work in, practice, things like that. So that's where they're at. Some big news that's coming out of the bubble right now. Zion Williamson, who is basically the reason why we're doing this 22-team venture, was because Zion is so popular. He is a money maker. Okay, he's a young phenom talent that's coming into the league for a Pelicans team that didn't have him all year, and they are relying on him to basically revive their season when he came back from injury, and they were a few games out of the playoffs. So Adam Silver, when drawing up this, because originally the plan was going to be just playoffs. And it would just be, your 16 teams seeded first to worst. Didn't matter the conference. Didn't matter East or West. Okay. Well, then they started to realize, hey, Damian Lillard, very popular guy, cover of 2K21. He's not in this 16 team. Zion Williamson, major phenom prospect. He's not in this tournament. How do we get these guys in this tournament? So they developed a system where if you were X amount of games out, then you would be able to play to, they do like an 8-game season to where if you were to make up those games that you're back, you get that spot in the tournament versus the teams that could be out. Just like, coming to the end of a season, going into the playoffs. Well, unfortunately, Zion has had a family emergency. So Zion has actually had to leave the bubble. The rule is when players leave the bubble, they're required to quarantine for 10 days when they return. So if Zion doesn't come back until the start of the season, that means he has to wait 10 days until he can play again. And with how the schedule is working out, they're not playing a game every day, but it's pretty close. He could miss these 8 games that they basically made this tournament for him. Granted, there's other teams, but realistically, if Zion was completely out, had no chance, or if they were in, I don't think we have a 22-team tourney bubble thing. So he has left. T's and P's to his family. Hopefully it's nothing serious, and if it is, hopefully everything turns out to be okay. Good for Zion for putting his family first. That's always great to see in a person, but detrimental to the possibility of what the Pelicans can do if Zion is not back, especially for someone that was, on a tear, then, or had an injury, wasn't able to play initially, comes back from injury, goes on a tear, then COVID hits, and now he can't play basketball. Well, now we've made it to where basketball can come back, and then boom, I can't play because this happened, which obviously could be very serious, and sports by no means will trump any of that. But to think all of the preparation that has gone into this and the possibility of him not playing can be detrimental to the league. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully they can get some things figured out. His family is okay and he can come back before the season starts. Maybe he misses a game, maybe two, maybe none. He would have to come back in the next 3 days, 3 to 4 days, and then he can play game one, but he wouldn't be able to practice. So he'd be playing game one, but he wouldn't have his feet underneath him, as they would say. So scary situation for both Zion and his family and the NBA. We'll see how that one plays out, and we'll track this one more closely. But there are already rumors that the bubble is being compromised. So what I mean by that is the players are in this imaginary bubble. Okay, this isn't like the Simpsons movie where a dome is actually dropped over the league. It is basically these players are in an area, and this area has like an imaginary perimeter, and you are not to leave that said perimeter. It's not being guarded by guards. It is up to the players to be responsible. Well, I don't think they anticipated the players to be, 1, hitting up females, 2, ordering Postmates, 3, ordering anything else that would require someone to bring them something from the outside bubble. Okay? This is how these things get shut down. If a female makes her way in and the players want to take them out on a cafeteria date and then go back to their room and do whatever they want to do, and something happens to where, she had COVID and then whatever happens, if that were to be the case, that would no longer just be that player being quarantined. Now, everyone's got to get tested. Everyone's got to be checked for symptoms. Then it becomes a huge issue with everyone here. And the whole reason why they wanted to have them all in one place is so they can monitor it. Keep it close-knit. If someone gets something, they shove them in a room, they quarantine it out. Once they're done, they come back and rotation. That's kind of how this process was supposed to work. Well, apparently the players were not expecting it to be as free reign as what it is. And that's leading to potential compromises. Nothing has happened to the point where people are testing positive, obviously, but it has been something where a player has been caught getting something and now they're being quarantined, they're being monitored, they're being disciplined, things like that. And it's happening very quickly. I mean, they've only been there for a week. So we're 1 week in, and there could be the potential of multiple months for these players if they make it to, deep in the playoffs or to the championship. So the NBA's got their work cut out for them, and obviously the Zion part of it is a big hit, but they also have these little things happening that they need to monitor as well. Having said all of that, if you watched my last episode with my guy Jonathan Davis, we talked about who we thought was going to win the tournament. And we both picked the Raptors making it and the Lakers or the Clippers. He picked the Lakers, I picked the Clippers. And then, to be a battle between them. And both of us actually went with the Raptors winning it. I have a sleeper. After watching some practice runs and reading some things, it's not that I've changed my mind. I still think the Raptors and the Clippers, or the Raptors and the Lakers, probably have the best route there. But the 76ers are sneaky. The 76ers are a team that they're young. They have the veteran presence where they need, but the athletic positions are very young. A team that if someone were to go down, let's say with a quarantine slap where they have to take 10 days off, they have someone that is young and talented that can kind of take over. They have Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris. Their veteran presence, they have Al Horford. If Al Horford goes down, that could be a bigger hit than if Ben Simmons goes down. But speaking of Ben Simmons, some things that I've been reading is they're exclusively trying him out at power forward, where Ben Simmons has always been the comparison to Magic Johnson, being a taller, lanky point guard, someone that can really dish the rock, create an offense, can't really shoot the ball very well, but he can create an offense. He creates a mismatch at the top of the key. Moving him to a power forward position really opens up that floor. And putting him right next to Joel Embiid can create some crazy offensive formations that they can really work with, especially when you're playing in a shortened tournament or a shortened season with a tournament that is like an AAU style where you're not going to do the same thing over and over and over and study and prep. You're going to be playing a lot of backyard basketball. A lot of the games are going to be determined by turnovers and fast breaks. You're going to see fast break points and turnovers skyrocket this year. And to have two people down low that can really create havoc is going to give them an edge that they wouldn't normally have in a regular season. So they are my sleeper. I'm not saying that they're going to win it all. I'm not saying that they're the best team in this tournament. But what they're doing and how they're approaching this is very interesting, especially since this is a different season. Doing the same thing that you did last year or the year before that got you there, but you had some injuries, it's not going to win it for you. This is going to be a different style of basketball. Now, this is the NBA. Jonathan alluded to this last episode. It's still the NBA. You still have the talent on these teams where you're not going to see the crazy upsets constantly like you would in March Madness. However, with most of these teams being where they're at, I mean, if you look at it, the 2 seed to the 8 seed, 4 or 5 games separate them. So a lot of these teams are very close where they're at. And generally, you'll see after the All-Star break, you'll see some trades made, some things happen, and then all of a sudden the team, catches a rhythm that carries into the playoffs. You don't have that right now. So it is going to be reliant a lot on talent. And the Sixers have a lot of young talent. And that's a good pick for a sleeper. So the 76ers are my sleeper. I'm squeaking that in before this starts. That way, if the Sixers do well, I can tell you I told you so. But some things, the major things coming out of basketball, obviously, their quote-unquote bubble being compromised and what's going on with Zion, making sure that he gets back and his family is safe. Those are the big topics of discussion. Season is still on. Should be happening at the end of this month. Moving to another sport that hasn't started yet, but they're in the works, baseball. Baseball has started their training camps. Now, baseball is a little different because baseball is doing everything at their home stadiums. Baseball was only going to come back. There was multiple things that the worst commissioner of all time, Rob Manfred, came out and said that, we need to have X amount of tests being available to us to where we're not taking them from the public. And the local markets need to be able to make this work to where teams can play at their home stadiums. What people don't understand is baseball makes a lot of their money off of their local markets. When you watch Indians baseball, you aren't watching it on ESPN every week or, MLB extra innings every week. If you live in Cleveland or you live outside of Cleveland and the Indians are your home team, you can tune into Root Sports Central or Fox Sports Central, whatever, and your team will be on every single night because that's your team. You tune into Fox Sports West, you're going to see the Angels. If you tune into, Yankees Entertainment Sports Network, you're going to watch the Yankees. So a lot of their money comes from those TV deals. So they knew that having a season would be pointless if we weren't collecting that money. So we have to do it at the home markets. So they are actually at their home markets right now. They are training. They're actually getting ready to do some exhibitions here in the next couple weeks for the season to kick off here shortly. No issues have been reported, major issues anyways. A couple people have tested positive. A lot of reports have come out from people that were previously tested positive, things like that, but nothing that is really throwing a wrench in the game right now. A funny story that's actually happening is the Toronto Blue Jays. Obviously, Canada is a lot more strict than the States right now. The Toronto Blue Jays players were told that if they are caught leaving the facility, it'll be like a $75,000 fine or a $750,000 fine and possible jail time. So they are taking this very seriously. Their players are on complete lockdown, and they're working on Canada being able to lift some of their traveling laws, because right now if you were to travel in or out of Canada, I don't believe you can travel out without quarantining, but if you go in, you have to quarantine for 14 days. So you can't really have the Yankees playing the Blue Jays because they have to wait 2 weeks. So I don't know if the Canada teams aren't going to play at home. No schedule has been released. No set in stone schedule has come out. The MLB is still working on how this is going to work out. I don't know if it's going to be like the Yankees play, 6 games in Toronto. 2 weeks before the season starts, the Yankees fly up to Toronto. They quarantine. Boom, they play, a 3-game series, take a day off, play a 3-game series, and then both teams travel back to the States, and then Toronto plays a lot of their games in the States. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know if they're still waiting on Canada's government to basically say, okay, we're going to create like a sports visa, and if these players are being tested X amount of times within a week, they don't have to quarantine. I don't know. These are all speculation. This is what could happen. But like I said, no set schedule, so we're not 100% sure on what's going on. But so far, baseball is heading in the right direction. Hockey recap. Right now, hockey's kind of in the same position that basketball's in. Everything's kind of a go. They're not doing one bubble. They're doing 2 bubbles. So they're actually doing 2 Canada hubs. I know that I believe it's Toronto. I'd have to look that up, who the 2 hubs are. NHL hub cities. I know they're both Canada cities. You are looking at Edmonton and Toronto. So Edmonton and Toronto will be the hub cities, and basically geographically, whichever one you're closest to, that's where you will quarantine. Right now, players are going to their facilities, just like baseball, but once the once they're 2 weeks out, they will all go to their bubbles, quarantine, and then the season will start. Or the playoffs, cup tournament, whatever they're calling it, will start. No big news. Obviously, these players have been going in and out of their own facilities. No issues have been really reported. Nothing to freak out about. So hockey looks like it is on its way. Unfortunately, my Kings aren't in this tournament because they started off the season extremely slow. But hey, we got a great draft pick in this year's draft, and we are looking to rebuild them. When we have a real regular season next year, we will come firing them pucks, top shelf sellies, boys. But hockey on its way, super stoked. Last sport to cover, football. Football's a 2-parter. Okay, you got college football and you got pro football. Both entities make a ton of money. Honestly, both entities make more money than the pro sports that we just talked about. College football is in I hate using the word interesting state, but it is, because college football has so many different levels. You have your different conferences, your different leagues. So you have or divisions. So you have Division I football, Division II football, FBS, FCS. And then you have within that, then you have your own conferences, and those conferences have their own governing bodies. So the Pac-12 can decide that we're only playing Pac-12 schools, but the SEC will only play schools in the state of Alabama, Indiana, Louisiana, whatever. They can make those decisions because that's their governing bodies. Well, the Ivy League schools, all the smart kids, they shut it down completely. Whether that's because it's as scary as it is or just profit-wise it doesn't make sense, they're obviously not going to come out and talk about that, but the Ivy League has shut it down. So Ivy League will not have college football this year. Now, most conferences are having conversations, Big 10, Pac-12, Big 12, having conversations about only playing conference games, not playing out-of-conference games, because it's a lot of travel. You're playing teams that might not have the same financial structure as you, so as far as testing might not be parallel to what you're doing. So they're trying to keep it all in conference. Nothing is set in stone. So far, college football looks like it is going to happen. If I were to move my chip, and I know during this entire time we've been talking about what sports are going to happen, what sports aren't going to happen, and I keep moving my chip to one sport to the next. Baseball was at one point not going to happen. Basketball at one point was not going to happen. Right now, my chip is in college football. College football is my sport that I don't know if it's going to happen, because I think once these conferences start putting down a lot of these rules, financially it just doesn't make sense. And then you're going to have these kids that they can go play football, but they can't go to school to get an education. And there's a lot of schools that are raising their eyebrows. There's a lot of deans out there that are like, look, if my kids can't come to learn a curriculum, I am not going to send them to the football facility. So who knows? College football right now is in the toughest spot. Right now, everything is still a go, but these are all the things that they're still talking about. Pro football. Holy bleep. Okay? Pro football is blowing up right now. And actually, as we record this episode, by the time you see this episode, the information might be a little bit different. But keep your eye out for the old Washington Post here. There is going to be an article that is going to hit about one said team that is going to absolutely explode. And it looks like... looks like it's out. So Washington Post article is out. There's a lot of allegations in this thing, so be careful what you're reading. Make sure that you're looking at it with the best perspective as possible. Not a good look for the Washington DC football squad. Obviously we are not naming them because they don't have a name as of Monday. They retired the Redskins name because it is offensive and they need to move on, and they've decided to move on. They have not picked a new team name yet. So right now they are just the Washington DC football squad, or the Washington DC team, or the Washington football team, or the team in Washington DC. Whatever you want to call them. Or as Pat McAfee calls them, the Washington TBDs. We don't know what their team name is going to be, and quite honestly, I don't give a rat's behind, because what they're doing, or what they did, not doing, because it already happened. What they did is disgusting, and all the allegations that are coming out right now, they're still coming out. There's still things being talked about. There's plenty of people that have been quoted and resourced, and it's not good. It's not a good look for the Redskins. You have refs allegedly being paid off. You have minority owners wanting out now. They want to sell their minority ownership. They want out. They don't want anything to do with this. Coaches being drunk and under the influence. Cheerleaders being prostituted. Sexually assaulted. There is so much that's coming out of DC right now that it is truly taking away from the possibility of having football. The NFL has the best chance to have a full season. They are able to watch all of these other sports happen, see where they've made their mistakes, where they've made their strides, and perfect their game plan to make sure that this happens. Now, they are making stupid decisions on the way, not just what the Washington team is doing, but what they are doing as a league. They're allowed to fight and punch and kick and tackle all game, but then at the end of the game, they can't talk to each other. They can't do jersey swaps. They can't be within a certain amount of feet of each other. When the game is over, they have to go straight to the locker room. That doesn't make any sense. You got players that can, sit in hot tubs and ice tubs and all this stuff together, but once the clock hits 0, they have to leave in an orderly fashion, and they can't be hanging out and all that. None of it makes sense, and it's because we don't know everything about this. If we knew everything about this, then it would be a different story. But the fact of the matter is we don't know everything about this. So we can't tell them that they're being dumb or whatever. It doesn't make any sense. I can tell you that it doesn't make sense, and I don't think that they're making the right decisions. But when something comes out that tells me otherwise, then we can have that conversation. So right now, football is not in a good state. I don't know all of the allegations. Okay. I knew that something was going to break before it did. I have the Washington Post article pulled up right now. I haven't read through it all the way, but I can tell you that, oh my God, I can tell you that a lot of the stuff that's in here is everything that I heard before it dropped. So It's not good. It's honestly it's not an easy article to read, and it is a huge blemish for the NFL right now. And this is one of those things where, like, the Patriots do this the best. Some bad news is going to happen. Bill Belichick got suspended for illegally recording Bengals practice, and then boom, they signed Cam Newton. And it's like, wait, didn't he get suspended or didn't he lose a draft pick? Who cares? They signed Cam Newton. Like, Patriots are known for that. Nothing the Redskins do right now will ever cover this up. This is going to take a lot of digestion from everybody to finally realize what's going on, judge them, and then move on. But the fact that there are minority owners that want out and want out immediately tells you how serious that this is. When you're an owner of a football team, you are literally printing money. The money never stops. You are constantly making money over and over and over and over. You never lose money. This is not a situation. The NFL is so successful. When you are an owner, especially a minority owner, you are raking in cash. So if you are willing to throw all that away to get out immediately, tells you how serious these things are. So definitely something to watch out for. If you're interested in what's going on, look up the Washington Post article. It'll go over everything that's going on. Again, all these are allegations. Not a lot of it is actually set in stone, confirmed. Actually, there's a lot of sources that are actually coming out and saying that none of this is true. So obviously, you're going to have to find allegiances and figure all that out. But if you want to read the article, the Washington Post article is up. You can go check that out. So yeah, but now we're actually going to move to the fun part. So we have a gentleman that most of you already know if you follow the show. He is my co-host on the other podcast that we do, Mashing Joys, where we cover gaming, entertainment, and things like that. We are known for doing top 10 lists. We love doing top 10 lists, and we love surprising each other with our lists. So when we do top 10s, we don't tell each other what those lists are. So we're going to bring Cody on here and we're going to talk about my list, and I'm going to let him kind of agree and disagree with my list. Obviously, this is my show. I do what I want, but I would love to have him on. He's been someone that's kind of helped produce this show as well as being my co-host for the other show, so he deserved a chance to be on CasonPoint for sure. So without further ado, my cousin, my co-host, and as he likes to say, co-conspirator for world domination, Cody Meyers. Cody, sir, how are you?
I am wonderful, Mr. Point. Thank you for having me on for the first time ever. Truly an honor to be here on Cason Point.
Well, I appreciate that. It is great to have you on. Before we get into this list, give the people, or I'll give the people a little insight on why this is special to us. Obviously, if you don't know who the gentleman is here with me, obviously I explained it before I introduced him, but what he means to me, he is the co-host of my other podcast, Mashing Joys, which if you haven't checked it out, please do so. It's on YouTube and all of your podcast platforms. You can check us out. We are pretty funny, if I do say so myself. But on our podcast, we regularly do top 10 lists. And we put a little spin on it of our own to where we will make our own lists and not tell each other what the list is. And that way the counterpart will get the crazy reaction. And also, sometimes you can run into a situation where you both pick the exact same thing, and there's kind of a cool bro moment. But realistically, the point is to, no pun intended, to give a top 10 list and let the listeners be as surprised as the co-host. So I went ahead and did a top 10 sports owners / CEO list. And I am going to go through my list. I wanted Cody to give me his reactions, see if he disagrees or agrees. But obviously the main reason on here is because I wanted to put a face out to the masses for CasonPoint to show you what you would get when you tune into Mashing Joys, which is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, gaming / entertainment podcast of all time.
Certainly better than anything you'll find on IGN.
Yeah. Or any of Ethan Hawke films.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Check out the Mashing Joys podcast for more insight on Ethan Hawke and his acting prowess.
Yep. 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 All right. So when we do these top 10 lists, we do a little segment before we dive into the top 10s where we do honorable mentions and dishonorable mentions. So my honorable mentions, I'll just list all three of them and kind of explain because all three of them are kind of lumped into the same reason why I made them my honorable mentions, not my top 10. So my honorable mentions in this order: number 1, Robert Kraft; number 2, Jerry Jones; and number 3, George Steinbrenner. The reason why I have these guys on my list is because they are great owners. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking their ability to make a profit, run a team. But I do believe that some of the decisions that they made as an owner kind of rubbed me the wrong way, which is why I wasn't able personally to put them in my top 10. George Steinbrenner obviously built World Series teams off of his pocketbook, which pisses a lot of people in the MLB off. If you're building an all-star team every year, you should win it. So kudos to him for having the balls to just write all the money out to do this, but also a time where it really wasn't good for baseball. Jerry Jones, same kind of thing. His quote is, "My hand don't get cramps when I'm writing checks." This guy's willing to pay, but he also pisses a lot of people off. Let's be honest. This guy does not make friends in this business. And as a businessman, you don't always have to. But when you win a Super Bowl with a coach and then fire that coach just because you don't like the guy, you basically had one of the greatest coaches coaching your team and you just kicked him out after you already won a Super Bowl. And then Robert Kraft, obviously 6 rings. The main reason why he's number 1 for me, I almost made him number 10, was because he purchased the Patriots for $172 million and turned it into $3.2 billion. So he's made a $3 billion profit, which is very impressive. But obviously his 6 Super Bowls are tainted with numerous allegations for cheating and conspiracy and blah, 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 blah. So I couldn't put him on my top 10 list because I have morals and the Patriots suck. So yeah, any issues with the honorable mentions?
Absolutely not. I think those are some great picks. I'm glad we're leaving Mr. Kraft's off the field extracurriculars out.
Yeah.
Because no one needs to, linger on that.
Nope, not at all.
But
Not at all.
great list, great successful owners.
Yeah, I agree. All right, dishonorables. Okay, we're going to do kind of the same thing because let's be honest, all 3 of these guys are complete Jack L. Wagons. The top 3 of my dishonorables go as follows. Number 3, James Dolan, because he's a king jack wagon. When you kick your number 1 fan out in Spike Lee, just kick him out because out of spite. You obviously aren't mature. You aren't putting the team before you. When Spike Lee's sitting in the seats, you are going to be on SportsCenter. Whether he is making comments to Kevin Durant when Kevin Durant's draining another 3 on your sorry team, you're still on SportsCenter. This is the whole bad publicity is good publicity stunt. But kicking Spike Lee out of your building for using an entrance that he's used for years, and a fan, mind you, that has spent millions of dollars going to your crappy games, that is not the bad publicity equals good publicity crap. Then he kicks Charles Oakley out of spite, which caused a big ordeal. You have constant complaints of racism throughout the organization from ex-players. You drove the greatest mind of basketball and Phil Jackson out of the building. And top-tier coaches. I mean, Van Gundy, even D'Antoni you can consider. I mean, there's a lot of good coaches that have come through the Knicks that he has just pushed out. So, bad owner, number 3. Number 2, a guy that might pop back into your head because we just talked about him on the show, Mr. Dan Snyder. Obviously, took forever to rename his franchise, which clearly is a racist remark to most people and is very offensive. So needed to rename it. It's been a conversation forever. Didn't decide to make that change until it started affecting his pocketbook, which, I mean, granted, as an owner, you have to look into branding and how it can affect your pocketbook. But to make a decision this late when Nike and FedEx are saying, sorry, we're pulling our name from your franchise, and then you decide, oh, yeah, it's too late. And then tons of allegations from ex-players, coaches, employees, which most of them have been proven not to be true, thank God. But still allegations nonetheless. And generally, as someone that works in business, when there's smoke, there's fire, and there's a lot of smoke around Dan Snyder. Number one, I use 3 words to describe this guy, and it only needs 3 words: Mr. Donald Sterling, an extreme racist. This guy is a total jackwagon. First of all, to get kicked out, and actually, we should be thanking Donald Sterling in a way, because it brought a great owner into the building because of him, in Steve Ballmer. But um, terrible actions. The guy obviously is completely out of touch, uneducated. He's lucky that he had the money to help him go through life, because if he didn't, that guy would be beaten up a lot for what he believes in, and the remarks that he made. Womanizer, all that crap. And just a terrible human being. That's why he is number 1 on the dishonorable mention. Any concerns with that list?
Absolutely zero concerns.
Good.
Disgusting, and absolutely disgusting.
Facts. Major facts. All right. Bottom 5 of the top 10. Number 10, Peter Holt, San Antonio Spurs owner. The reason I have him at number 10, because the Spurs are the smallest market in Texas. As a matter of fact, they're one of the smallest markets in the NBA. And to turn them into a $1 billion profit is extremely impressive, especially when you look at basketball compared to football and baseball. Their teams are not nearly worth as much as their football and basketball counterparts. And he also ended up winning 5 titles in 16 seasons. Very impressive. Guy obviously knows basketball, obviously knows business, hires the right people. Obviously, Popovich being at the helm of that is helping a lot. But Peter Holt is also cutting his check. So to understand that Pop is kind of the glue and to keep him there is very impressive. So Peter Holt, number 10. Number 9, my counterpart here might get a little upset with this gentleman being on the list, being that he is part of one of his major rivals. But Peter Magowin, he is the San Francisco Giants owner. The reason why I have him on the list and I have him so low isn't because, so he is not one on this list that has a lot of titles. As a matter of fact, he has 0. But the impact that he made on his team. So when the Giants actually did win the World Series, it was a couple years after Peter actually left. When they won the World Series, they actually brought him back for the championship parade because of how much of an impact he had on the San Francisco Giants. Obviously, the Giants have a huge history, being one of the teams that moved from New York to California and kind of started the out west movement. But when Peter took over, they were the laughingstock. They were not at all at the top of their game. And he turned them into a powerhouse, bringing in Barry Bonds, taking him to World Series. Obviously, they couldn't close the deal, but yeah, that's why he's on the list. No titles for Peter, but definitely created a dynasty that led to titles. Number 8, this name might sound familiar to you, Mr. Conn Smythe. Conn Smythe is the MVP, Stanley Cup MVP trophy. It is named after Mr. Smythe because he actually was one of the owners that changed the image of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I believe they were like the Toronto St. Patrick's or something like that. He changed them to the Maple Leafs. And after doing that, he won 8 Stanley Cup titles in 1932, 42, 45, 47, 48, 49, 51, and 62. When you win that many Stanley Cups as an owner, you deserve to have your name on the MVP trophy. Obviously, Lord Stanley is the name of the cup, so you cannot rename that, but the next closest thing would be the MVP for that, Lord Stanley, and Conn Smythe deserves to be a part of that, which, by the way, Mr. Quick, Conn Smythe winner. Number 7, now my counterpart will be excited. Walter O'Malley, Dodgers owner. The reason why I put Walter O'Malley on there is for a couple reasons. It's not because he actually won 4 of the 6 Dodgers titles. It's because he was one of the ringleaders of bringing baseball out west. The Brooklyn Dodgers were obviously based on the East, and he moved them to Los Angeles, and they became the Los Angeles Dodgers, which they still are today. He was also a big part of bringing in Jackie Robinson, which helped the color barrier in Major League Baseball, which, if you don't know, Jackie Robinson's number is retired all throughout baseball, and they actually have a Jackie Robinson Day. So without Walter O'Malley, you would not have 42, you would not have Jackie Robinson, and you would not have an amazing movie with the likes of Chadwick. So, yeah, second best movie he's been in.
Facts.
Yeah. Third, maybe, once Black Panther 2 is released. We'll see.
We'll see.
Number 6, another very similar to Walter O'Malley, just on the basketball side, Walter A. Brown for the Celtics. He actually was the owner of the Celtics when they were established. He was the one that hired Red Auerbach, which is one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time. He also drafted Chuck Cooper. Chuck Cooper was the first black basketball player ever drafted in the NBA, so kind of that color barrier. And he ended up winning 7 championships, 6 of those 7 in a row. Very impressive. The original trophy, because of that, was actually named after him. It was the Walter A. Brown Trophy, and then that was later changed to the Larry O'Brien. But the initial NBA championship trophy, after it was called NBA World Championship or something, changed to the Walter A. Brown Trophy and then Larry O'Brien. So that is the bottom 5. Going into the 5 winners, this is where the counterpart gets extremely excited. Wouldn't be surprised if he's wearing an article of clothing. Number 5, Vince McMahon. He is the CEO and president for WWE. He is committed to the brand. How did I know? The reason why I put Vince McMahon in here, obviously, he's the CEO part, not the sports owner part. The reason why I put him on here is because when you are a business person and someone that at that high up the ladder, you want your image to be as clean cut as possible. Because if it's not, it leaves for air pockets and holes that people can weasel their way in and start tearing it apart. Vince McMahon doesn't give a rat's behind. He is willing to jump on the sword. He is willing to fall on the knife, whatever you want to use as the reference. And he will take the hits for his league to be successful. And, wrestling in the 80s and the 90s was, getting competitive and getting popular. And Vince McMahon was able to not only ride that wave, but once everything crashed, was able to still bring it to the top and make it what it is today. So Vince McMahon, number 5, Sir Mediocre Panda, what say you?
As I am wearing one former and one current rival hat, shout out to All Elite Wrestling. I am a huge wrestling fan. I completely see the point on a complete tangent here of people saying, wrestling's not a sport because everything is predetermined. Sports is more of just a setting for their storytelling. At the end of the day, it is stories that they're trying to tell. But yeah, Vince, like him or hate him, he's done what's best for his business, and you've seen that WWE is one of the most recognizable brands worldwide. Things big spectaculars like WrestleMania being broadcast in 30 plus countries and different languages, and is a huge moneymaker for the business and the industry. WrestleMania weekend is a huge deal wherever it takes place. So he's kind of been the figurehead in driving pro wrestling forward in the mainstream. And at the end of the day, you have to applaud his commitment and putting his business first, no matter what. So, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with Vince.
Right on. Number 4, already mentioned him because someone horrible did something horrible. Steve Ballmer, owner of the Clippers. Another guy on this list that has no accomplishments. As a matter of fact, he literally has 0 when it comes to owning a basketball team. But he is a genius when it comes to the business side of basketball, and he is an amazing fan. He is the true definition of when you're a manager or a business owner. They always tell you, if you implement your own processes through what you do, your people will buy into what you're doing. Practice what you preach, basically. This dude does this every single home game. Like, how could you not be a Clippers fan in that stadium and not go bonkers when he goes on the screen? I actually had the privilege of standing about 10 feet away from Mr. Ballmer because Kayla, my wife, and I we went to the introduction of Steve Ballmer at the Staples Center. We were able to get tickets, and we sat like second row. Electric, absolutely electric human being. To give you an idea of how much in touch he is with the business side of things, Steve Ballmer had been advocating to be an owner for years and years and years and years. Good friend of why can't I think of the Seahawks owner's name? Oh, that's gonna bug me. Anyways, the Seahawks owner, he's good friends of the Seahawks owner. Steve Ballmer is from Seattle. So when the Clippers, back when the Hornets were up for sale, when a lot of teams have been up for sale, Steve Ballmer has been in the conversation, and a lot of it was to bring the Sonics back because the Ballmer and his team didn't want to wait for an expansion, which might be coming here shortly. But he didn't want to wait for an expansion. He wanted a team back in Seattle ASAP. And so when he took over the Clippers, a lot of people were fearful that the Clippers would leave. And the Clippers were just now getting good. You had Lob City. Everything was kind of coming in to where Kobe's on his way out. Rest in peace. Clippers were on their way in. And a lot of Clippers fans that dealt with a lot of turmoil for a long time were getting ready to get their chance, and they were going to be very upset if they were moved to Seattle. And I still, to this day, believe that was 100% his intention. But after hearing the fans of LA and hearing the rally cry, he announced during his ownership announcement that he had absolutely 0 plans of discussing any move to Seattle. As a matter of fact, I will be looking into keeping the team here in Los Angeles, and we will get out of the Lakers' shadow, was basically what he said. Fast forward, was it 8 years? He has now purchased the Forum, and the Clippers are going to make the fabulous Forum their new home. When he was in the Staples Center, he actually went to a game, like one of the first games before, or one of the last games he went to before he was going to become owner. He went to a Clipper game and was upset that the Clippers, even though they were on the court, they were playing a completely different team, the Bucks or whoever they were playing, the Lakers stuff was still up in the rafters. And so when he bought the team, he even told the GM, coach GM, since Doc Rivers, he told Doc Rivers that we will never be anything if we're playing in an arena that purple and gold is above us. So once he took over, he bought tarps and all this tech to get all the purple and gold out of the Staples Center while they're playing, which is impressive. Kind of goes to the whole business side of things. Like, just very in touch, and just a great owner. That's why he's number 4 on my list. Now, number 3, I didn't state, but big part of what I wanted to do here is focus on individual owners. I didn't want to focus on families. Like, for instance, the Rooney family. I didn't want to focus on that because the lineage is so long that it's very hard to pick one person that really made a difference, because one person made a difference, the other person kind of rode those coattails and then made a difference, and then just so on and so forth. But the one family where it was easy to pinpoint was number 3, Dr. Jerry Buss, Los Angeles Lakers owner. Um, if you've ever heard the word Showtime, it's not because it's a television network. It's because it's the Los Angeles Lakers. The Los Angeles Lakers' flashy approach of Showtime was Jerry Buss's idea. Bringing in guys like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, James Worthy, creating this persona of it actually reminds me a lot of like the Raiders. Like when the Raiders, Al Davis took over the Raiders, Al Davis wanted like the grit and the fear of like a pirate. Like, I want, when we go into a stadium, whether we're the better team or not, we are going to strike fear in the heart of our opponent. So he made the jerseys black and silver. He wanted everything to be intimidating. And that's what he stuck with. He went with players that were intimidating, so on and so forth. Jerry Buss did the exact same thing, but he went with flash. I want my players to be so flashy that everyone gravitates towards us. Everyone wants us to win. So when it comes to us going to arenas, we drown out everyone else. Great business strategy. It worked. He ended up winning 10 championships. Then, because he was so successful with the Lakers, he decided, I'm going to dabble in the WNBA, took over the WNBA LA Sparks, won 2 championships with them. So, multi-champion in 2 different leagues. Same sport, but 2 different leagues. Is it same sport? We won't go into that. So, brought in the flashy Lakers, which brings in obviously top tier celebrities. You see Jack sitting courtside all the time. You see the Kardashians courtside all the time. I mean, the Laker games are where you want it to be. And that's what they were in the 80s and late 70s, 90s. That's where you wanted to be. You wanted to be watching the Lakers. And that was because of Dr. Jerry Buss. So that's why he's number 3. Now, top 2. Any issues with 4 and 5?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Top 2. This was very hard. This probably took me a good half hour on who I wanted to be number 1 and number 2, because both are amazing business people. So number 2, Mark Cuban, owner of the Dallas Mavericks. The reason why I have Mark Cuban in here is because I believe he is a little bit of every owner that we just discussed, except he will always make sure that he is in the right side of the media discussion. So like when you talk about Vince McMahon not, okay with having, the bad image painted, Mark Cuban will do everything in his power to do the right thing, but make sure that he's not doing it in a way that would project negativity. He is also an extreme fanboy, just like Steve Ballmer. Young guy, started out with some tech companies, H&R Block, ever heard of it before it was actually H&R Block, and sold them, built businesses up, sold them. Young kid goes in, says, what, Dallas Mavericks? He's from Pittsburgh, by the way. From Pittsburgh, ended up going to Indiana to finish school, so nowhere near Dallas, Texas. Went, what? The Mavericks are how much? Yes, done. Purchases the Dallas Mavericks, turns an amazing profit on the Mavericks, only has 1 championship, but one would argue that one championship is worth a hell of a lot more when you talk about the team that they team they beat. And he was one of the first guys to really pave the way for foreign players. Getting Dirk Nowitzki in, Steve Nash, technically. You got guys like Luka Doncic now, Kristaps Porzingis. Actually, what's funny is when he let Steve Nash go, ever since then, he had been kicking himself, saying that was the worst decision he ever made. And so when Kristaps Porzingis became available, he jumped right on that and he threw the Knicks everything he could. And he actually came out and made a statement and said, Steve Nash has been irking me ever since I let him go. I was not going to let another player like him and Kristaps Porzingis slip through my fingers. I had to make this happen. So that is why Mark Cuban is number 2 on my list. Number 1, Dana White. Now, UFC CEO, let's talk about why I have him at number 1. Obviously, he runs a league just like Vince McMahon, so you can't talk about championships, what he's done. It's strictly business. This is a business decision as why I have him on number 1. He took a sport, okay, which is a fighting sport, where boxing has a history, a long history. You could argue kickboxing has a history. Wrestling has a history, whether it's Olympic or cinematic wrestling. And he made the UFC bigger than all of them. And he started them after they had already created the foundation. He came in late to the game, and now he's at the top of the game. As a matter of fact, one of the highest paying fights in boxing history is with a UFC fighter. Not only that, not only does he make sure that his product is at the top tier, but he does it in a way where it always seems like he's a step ahead. COVID-19, ever heard of it? National, global, worldwide pandemic. He was the first sport back. They bleed and spit and sweat in each other's mouths. And he came back first. The man secured an island. Yas Island.
Yes.
Secured an island so international fighters can continue to make money during this pandemic. Social injustice. Same thing. UFC is a giant melting pot of a bunch of different races from a bunch of different countries. And not once have you heard of anything about race in the UFC. This man knows how to run a business. He knows how to make his employees happy, which in this case is the fighters. Granted, there's a lot of greedy fighters out there that aren't happy. But when it comes to the business side of things, guess what? Dana White is going to, just like Vince McMahon would, he's going to turn this into a positive. Oh, Conor McGregor retires again? Let's start some beef with Conor McGregor, make it seem like we're not talking. And then once Masvidal's done losing to Usman again, I'm going to call McGregor and I'm going to be like, hey, how does a $400 million payout sound? Beat this guy Masvidal. Here you go. UFC 260. Whatever it is. Boom. That is how good of a promoter he is. He is not only a great businessman, but he actually gets down, gets dirty, promotes these fights. I mean, if you were to look up UFC, just type in UFC promo, 90% of it is going to involve Dana White. It's not the fighters talking trash to each other. It's Dana White introducing the fighters and talking about them talking trash. Dana White owns that image. And because of that, UFC has climbed all the way to the top. People like us tune in every weekend that they're on, whether it's pay-per-view or not. Oh, and not to mention ESPN. Ever heard of it? UFC pay-per-view. Yeah, links up with ESPN Plus. So now ESPN Plus members can also get their fights. So they don't strictly have to go through pay-per-view. Just these business decisions that you don't think about are a big deal. And then when you sit back and you look and you see how things have grown and you're like, oh my God, that was a great decision. A great decision. Also, pretty good video games. I actually think.
Here he goes to the shelf again. This is a constant thing we do on the Mash and Joyce podcast. The second best UFC video game.
I agree.
Shout out to the Iceman, Chuck Liddell.
But yeah, I mean, great video games. And then obviously bringing EA Sports in for the newest installments. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing. Simple as that. And that's why he's number one. Any issues with top two?
Absolutely not.
Hashtag Mark Cuban for president.
Yes, sir.
I'm telling you right now, if Mark Cuban ran for president and Dana White was vice president,
oh jeez,
watch out. Every country right now, watch out. We're gonna start cloning John Jones into freaking soldiers. It's gonna be gnarly. It's gonna be gnarly.
All of our soldiers with an 83-inch reach and devastating kicks.
Here's the tail of the tape. USA wins. So good.
Can we get Bruce Buffer announcing?
Oh my God, announcing wars. How awful. It's time. Yeah, that's not good. Not good for the other countries. Great for us. Also fantastic. That'd be fantastic to watch on TV.
Yeah. Can we get constant 24/7 news coverage? I mean, like OJ trial news coverage with Joe Rogan.
Speaking of OJ, have you seen the new Bronco?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of tempted, bro.
I'm 100% tempted.
I'm like Bronco Cybertruck.
So actually, hopefully no one watching this is taking my idea, which I'm kind of reluctant to say it on air, but I looked up Idaho's custom plates and OJ's plate number from California is available in Idaho. So I'm low-key going to make that license plate and getting a Bronco and put
a white Bronco.
No, I can't do the white. The blue's too good looking.
Oh, but dude, if you're gonna do the OJ plate number, you gotta get a white Bronco.
I can't do the OJ. Have you seen the people that have old Broncos though, and their license plates are like not OJ?
I've not. I wouldn't be surprised if Post Malone did that because I know he has a Bronco.
There's a bunch of people that have white Broncos and all of them say not OJ or who's OJ. Oh, so good. But I mean, like his California license plate was like 7WCL757 something. Like no one's gonna know that it's OJ's except me. I'm the only person that's gonna know that I have OJ's license plate number.
I don't know, man. I've seen some people who are like OJ Simpson historians.
Well, Opa for sure would be like,
100%.
Jay, why did you get Mr. OJ Simpson's license plate number? That is not okay.
Yeah. He'd be pulling Kayla aside. Kayla, watch out. He's got something planned.
Yeah. Do not buy leather gloves. I repeat, do not buy leather gloves. But yeah, I was thinking of that or like a quit or something just as the license plate, some reference, but I think putting his license plate number would be phenomenal.
That would be so amazing.
The blue 4-door with the white interior. I can't have white interior because I have kids, but oh my God, that looks amazing.
Plus, how can you cover up the blood?
Facts. Big fat. Look at you looking out for me. By the way, that blood is from every other sports podcaster because I'm just murdering this game. But boom. And that's no big deal. Yeah. So that's the list. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure that you go check out Mashing Joys along with CasonPoint. We got some rebranding things going on, some new images. So take a look, see if you like it. And we will have some more episodes out on both episodes or both podcasts. Mashing Joys, we're putting out roughly about 2 episodes a week for Mashing Joys. We have a big streamer segment coming up where we're actually going to interview some Facebook gaming streamers, which is going to be pretty sweet. Slide some Twitch streamers in there as well. We know that they got some things to say, and it's a platform we want to give to them, so we're very privileged we get to do that. And CasonPoint will keep trying to keep you about one episode a week. Obviously, no sports right now, so it's tough to cover. Once sports are back, it'll be very easy to get the 1 episode out a week, which is very soon, which is why I wanted to do this episode to kind of get everyone prepped for what's coming with a little teaser of the top 10. So Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We love you. We appreciate you. Make sure that you subscribe to all channels that you listen on. Remember, when you hit that and you hit that notification bell, it will notify you when we go live. I will let Mediocre Panda tell you what he tells everybody about the bell.
Oh, you got to mash that bell.
Yeah, bro. So when you hit that and you set up your notifications, when I put up an episode or we put up an episode, I keep doing this because you're on the left on my screen, but you're really right here. When this guy and I put up a show, it'll notify you immediately. And then depending on your settings on what you listen to, you can even set it to download. So when it notifies you, it'll automatically download so you can listen to it when you don't have Wi-Fi or cellular, whatever. You don't have to. I'm just trying to give you tips. But when you do that, it helps us. Obviously, we are taking our time to create this platform, and we want this platform to grow for other people to use. So please show us some love. Greatly appreciated. And as we end every episode, may the sports be with you.